Hello and welcome to the Spiritual Intelligence Briefing number 32. We're continuing our series, The Dreams of Presidents, tonight with William McKinley. Now, I know what you're going to say. Nobody's gotten excited about McKinley since Theodore Roosevelt knew that he passed and he was going to become the next president. But what we're doing is we're establishing a base of how God speaks through dreams to the chief executive of our nation. We've looked at Lincoln. We've looked at George Washington. We've looked at Garfield. We looked at Barack Obama a little bit. We're looking at McKinley, and there's more and more others. The more that I dig into this topic as a historian, the more that I find undiscovered nuggets in books from the 1800s and the 1700s that talk about how God spoke to these men in dreams. And it's absolutely fascinating because I feel like it's a story that's never been told. History wants to remember things, but when it gets to things like dreams and their relationship with God, depending, unfortunately, upon the political leanings of the author or the historian, stuff gets left out. We even see that in the movies that they make about former presidents and things like that. So I'm happy and excited as we continue our spirit-led research and we find things in particular hidden in the archives and the annals of history related, much like in the Bible, to how God continues to speak today, historically in the United States of America, and to kings and presidents. So welcome to the Spiritual Intelligence Briefing. I'm excited to have you with us tonight. If you're tuning in, let me know where you're at, where you're from, and does Saturday night at 6 p.m. Eastern work? Because I thought about doing this for our West Coast people at like 8 or 9 p.m. Would that be better? Let me know what time. It's like 3 in the afternoon in California. But we have people listening in from all over the United States and around the world, as you'll soon see. But I want to know what time works for you on Saturday night. So let me know who you are, where you're from, and what time Saturday you would like to see be the regular time for the Spiritual Intelligence Briefing. So let's say hi to a few people. All right. Mimi is excited for tonight's program. It's good to see you, Mimi. Hello, Lainey from Detroit. It's good to see you as well. All right. Kentucky. Mimi is in Kentucky, actually. Hello, Mimi. All right. Hello from Australia. Elaine, it's good to see you. She's off to worship now, but we'll watch the replay. All right. Dawn from Texas. It's good to see you. Papa from Pittsburgh. JC. Hey, how you doing? Welcome. We're glad you're with us. Susie, it's good to see you. Glad you're here. Northwest Florida. Megan, I hear it's hot down in Florida. I'm so glad I'm not in Florida at the moment. I hear it's ridiculously warm down there. Hello from Pataskala. It's good to see you. Hello, Mike from Virginia. 6 p.m. is good. All right. Hello from Douglas, Georgia. Whatever time is good for you. Okay. Lolly, thanks for asking. Yes, this time is good as I watch in Virginia. All right. Kentucky, 6 p.m. is good. Okay, 6 p.m. to me is like the middle of the day. I mean, I go to bed at like 1 or 2, so 6 p.m. seems awfully early. But if you guys like 6 p.m., we can keep it. So one of the things that I want to talk to you guys about is the spiritual intelligence modules 1 and 2 classes are starting again in 9 days. We only do a couple of these a year. And so I want you to be aware that we're about to do the spiritual intelligence module 1 again. And I'm glad that you'll have the opportunity to jump in. Some of you are new to the channel. You're not really sure what the dream or the spiritual intelligence thing is about. Some of you have been around kind of a looky-loo for a long, long time, back in the days of Annie Kate, and you've seen a lot of different things from the dreams through the Bible to live dreams. We did live dream interpretation for, gosh, the better part of 5 or 6 years, every single Tuesday. And now we're switching it up with the spiritual intelligence briefings. But the reason we're doing that is because part of what I want to do is showcase what we're about and what we're doing. Live dreams is not really what we do. I don't really interpret everybody's dreams that they send in, and people often ask me, can I pay you to interpret dreams? We don't really do that. What we do is, excuse me, we take dreams, particularly dreams of national or political importance, and we archive them. And then when something happens related to history or related to like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, we started looking at dreams. Did we have any warnings that this was coming? Yeah, we had about 12 different dreams that gave us 7 data points that were factually evident in the White House Correspondents' Dinner event. And so when we see things like that, we know God is speaking, and sometimes we do a postmortem on something happens and we're like, well, we should have seen this. Why didn't we know about this? Did God say anything about this? And then we'll look back, and sure enough, sometimes he does and sometimes he has. And so part of what we're doing is we're developing an intelligence capability for the United States of America based on mainly dreams, but dreams, visions, and we even use prophecy as confirmation. The Bible says we know in part and we prophesy in part. There's a whole lot of prophets. We love the prophets, but there's a whole lot of people saying a whole lot of stuff right now, and not all of it's right. And if you're tuned into just one person, it's easy to kind of get off track. And so what we like to do is we like to look at, okay, dreams don't come from us. They're not our ideas. They're not us backing up memory. They're not coming from our psyche. They're not coming from our experiences during the day. And science has proven this. And I've done numerous videos on how the science checks this out. So when people say, well, science says, well, but they don't actually look at like neuroscience and brain scans and studies and things like that, because it's not your memory sectors that are firing when you're having a dream. It's not your imagination sectors. It's not your frontal lobe at all. It's the sides of the cerebral cortex that are mainly used when you're sleeping or when you're doing something and your mind is completely unfruitful. And so because we know that God speaks in dreams, we collect dreams that people are having. Why? Because it's a better source than prophecy, if I can be frank with you. The problem with prophecy is you got a human trying to put their thoughts and ideas and their emotions into it. So they may, well, I don't like this person, so I'm going to tell you this person, I heard this. Well, how do we know? We can't verify that they heard that, and we can't verify that they're right. The only way we could do that is to keep track of every prophecy they've ever done and grade it like on a scale of 1 to 100. And then we might find out that a lot of prophets out there are like 20%ers. They get about 20% of what they say right, and that's it. Dreams are different because we can verify. We understand the language of God. We know what God is saying in dreams. And then we get to be part of the interpretive or the analysis, the decoding process. Most often, God will he'll even give prophets or leaders dreams. They have no concept of what they mean. I have to crack up. There's so many people that will share dreams online, and then they'll give like this 5-minute little spiel of how it's literal and maybe include a scripture verse and make a teaching moment. And those of us in dream interpretations, we kind of chuckle because they're doing their best, but it's nowhere close to what God is saying. But when you study the language of God and you realize it's a coded language that carries secrets, it's very, very rarely, if ever, literal, then it changes everything. Nobody's teaching this. Nobody out there is teaching what we're teaching, how to decode the hidden, secret, ever-changing, and what we call the dynamic language of God. So if somebody's teaching you about a dream dictionary, that may be good if you're like a toddler, just barely learning how to speak the language of God. I mean, I guess, sort of. The problem is it's wrong much of the time, because it's not a fixed language. Car does not always mean ministry. In fact, it rarely means ministry. But people that teach that are people in ministry. So maybe to them, it meant ministry in a dream. And so they want to transpose that on every dream you have of a car. It means ministry. And if you're a business guy, you're sitting there like, I don't have a ministry. I don't know why God has given me a dream about a car, because I'm not in ministry. Exactly. So the dynamic language of God is a language that is ever changing. It changes with every expression. You could have a dream about a dog one day, and it means man's best friend. And another day, it means the dog that bit you in the face when you were 5. And it's an attack against your person and your image. Completely different things. But that's why we teach how to hear and understand the language of God. A while back, I was having a discussion with someone, and I just said, you know what, do we really believe this stuff? Because if it's cool, if it's one of those weird kind of charismatic things that nobody's really into, then I'm out. And that's kind of how most churches treat dreams. A lot of people, they don't even know what people have dream. We get this all the time. They go to their pastor, and their pastor pats them on the head. Oh, Ethel, are you dreaming about World War III again? Send us those dreams, because we take them seriously. Pastors don't know what to do with them. They're great people, but their job is not spiritual intelligence. So they don't even have a grid for the things that we do or the people that we advise with the kind of intelligence that God gives us in dreams. And so if you've been around this community for a long time, or if you're hearing this for the first time and you're like, something is resonating in you, something is stirring in your spirit, you're like, I want to be a part of that, then I want to personally invite you to be a part of the new movement in the prophetic, which is spiritual intelligence. And the way that you become part of that is you just jump in with both feet and take the spiritual intelligence module 1. Again, our class is coming up soon. This is what it looks like. Spiritual intelligence module 1. It's starting June 29th. You can go to our website and get information about it and check it out. If you've taken Mod 1, I recommend you take Mod 1 before you do Mod 2, because we build precept upon precept, line upon line. But this is Mod 2. We're also starting a Mod 2 class on the 29th, June 29th. And so if you go to the website and you click on enroll, and it will take you to our courses, and you'll be able to check out our courses. But take a look at that. If this is resonating with you, we're getting an ever increasing amount of people on the national level of government, whether it's military, whether it's the intelligence community, whether it's people in the administration, that are finding out, because we've been covert and we stay covert. There's a lot of dreams and a lot of incredible stories that we have that we don't share, and probably never will, at least while certain people are alive, just because we want to protect the confidentiality of the people that we work with. But you would be absolutely floored and amazed at the things that God is showing us in the secrets of spiritual intelligence and in the hidden language. So if you want to be part of this, jump in with us, take a course, get started, and learn what God is saying in the figurative language of God. And so tonight, we're going to look at yet another not real well-known president, but we're going to see how God spoke to this man and how God spoke through his life. And it's going to floor you, the things that we're going to discover. So hello from Colorado. This time is good. Hello from Western New York. Thank you for making this happen. It's our pleasure. Anytime. We're glad that we could be here. And it's such a needed service. There's so much mixture in different advisor groups that are advising the president, or even the intelligence community, where there's been abuses and there's been disconnects between the executive branch and what's happening in the intelligence world. And the president needs advisors that can see in the spiritual realm. And just because people are spiritual doesn't mean they can see spiritual intelligence. There's a lot of good pastors and friends that the president has that I'm sure advise him on different matters. But on spiritual intelligence, he needs a special group and a special tool with special weapons to be able to fight the fight that comes against the chief executive of our nation. And God gives warnings in dreams. He gives warnings of war. He gives warnings of potential assassinations. And we've seen this over and over and over again. Tonight is yet another story of somebody that was warned in a dream by God and then went on days later actually to be assassinated. And this is William McKinley. And this story is really interesting, and it has a couple of interesting twists related to spiritual intelligence in it. By the way, if you didn't know, I was a rescue worker at Ground Zero after 9/11, and so I've struggled with like my breathing. Don't tell me what potions and lotions I need to take, because I've done a lot, tried a lot, but that's the reason why sometimes when I talk, I yawn. So it's not that I don't want to be here. It's a breath control thing. I've had some of the best doctors in the country look at it, x-rays, MRIs, all kinds of stuff. So, oh, well, try lemon water. Well, thank you. We've done that. We've tried that. But I just want to let you know, so you're not, man, this guy yawns during his own discussion. What the heck is his problem? We've asked that a lot. We haven't figured it out yet. All right, absolutely. I'm looked at like I'm crazy, so I learned to keep it to myself. Thank you, Dr. John. I saw the notifications. Love and prayers. Great days ahead. Amen. I've been a vivid dreamer since a 3 or 4-year-old. This has been so important to me and many others. Awesome. Awesome. I think I just started it. All right. Cool. God bless. Keep America strong. We got people jumping in on the spiritual intelligence classes. I love that. Much needed. Can hardly wait for June 29th. Yes, Susie. Excited to have you. Awesome. Good deal. Hello from Detroit. It's good to see you, Mary. All right. Yeah, so many people stopping in. Hello from Vermont. Doug, hey, it's good to see you. Hello. Mimi again. It's good to see you. Thank you for your service to the United States. Amen. It's a pleasure and a privilege. Happy to see everyone tonight. All right. Well, we're going to get started. I do want to share with you a commercial that we made for the Spiritual Intelligence Module 1, just to give you a little bit of what is it like and what are you talking about. Now, it says in this commercial, Spiritual Intelligence Mentorship. That's the name that we had for it before. It's actually a much expanded course, the Spiritual Intelligence Module 1, and that's what's starting June 29th. We live in a world with much confusion, propaganda, and outright lies. It's hard to know what's real, what's false, and what's really going on. Do you have even one source that you can trust? And I mean really trust. Can you imagine leading a state or an army or a nation in this environment? What if you heard from God every day about your life, your purpose, and your future, and you understood with clarity what to do? Imagine hearing so clearly that he even trusted you with intelligence to advise leaders desperate for answers. Hi, I'm John Redenbow, and I have the honor of leading the Spiritual Intelligence Mentorship, an in-depth program where a team of people work with you in a highly structured atmosphere to teach you how to decode the encrypted language of God through dreams. If you're up for the challenge, I invite you to apply today. Register at spiritualintel.com. All right. We love you, John. Take a deep breath. Nice to see everybody. All right. Well, let's start talking about President McKinley. What is McKinley's story? McKinley has a really, really interesting story. I find a lot of people interesting, but we're going to start in, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a briefing about his life. So the time frame, William McKinley was born in January 29th of 1843. 1843. So the Civil War, just for context, begins in 1861 when he's 18, or he enlists when he's 18. So he's the 7th of 9 children, raised in a Methodist family with strong religious influences. So this is William McKinley, and I'm going to share with you some pictures and some things. So he was born in 1843. 1861, the Civil War begins. At 18, he enlisted in the Union Army shortly after the outbreak of the American Civil War, and he served in the 23rd Ohio Volunteer Infantry. He was in the Battle of Antietam in 1862. It was one of the defining moments of the war. And by the way, it was one of the battles before which Abraham Lincoln had his famous recurring dream. He distinguished himself, McKinley did, during the Battle of Antietam. Under heavy fire, he delivered food and coffee to soldiers on the front lines and was promoted for bravery. Now, the Civil War, as you know, ended in 1865, and he left the Army with the rank of brevet major, and he earned the lifelong nickname of Major McKinley. Now, 2 years later, he's admitted to the Ohio bar, and he begins practicing law in Canton, Ohio. He gets married in 1871 to Ida Saxton McKinley. He has a series of family tragedies between 1873 and 1875, where his daughter Catherine dies in infancy, and daughter Ida, little Ida, died at the age of 4. Ida McKinley's health had declined severely afterward. That's his wife. And McKinley became devoted to caring for her throughout the marriage. So 2 daughters die between 1873 and 1875, and his wife gets really, really sick. In 1876, he's elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. In the 1880s, he became a leading Republican voice on tariffs and industry and developed a reputation for honesty and personal kindness. In 1890, he sponsored the McKinley tariff, lost re-election during a Democratic wave. So in 1891 to 1895, he serves as governor of this great state of Ohio. And in 1896, he won the presidency with the support of Senator Mark Hanna, which was one of his best friends. And he defeated William Jennings Bryan in the election of 1896. March 4th, 1897, he was sworn in as the 25th president of the United States. So somebody we know is 45, he was 25. But now in 1898, and this was something that we're going to talk about the dream part, is the Spanish-American War. If you remember your history, not that anybody remembers 1898, but the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor. Now, we thought this was an act of war, and there was the call, "Remember the Maine." I've read books about this because it's a naval offshoot to a war, which I think is fascinating. And some of the best guesses or the reconstructions of what really happened was that it was an engine room or a boiler explosion, and it wasn't actually a bombing or an act of war. So it's possible we went to war over nothing in the Spanish-American War. But anyway, it's interesting. American victories led to the acquisition of Puerto Rico, Guam, and then there came the question of the Philippines. What do we do with the Philippines? Now, the Philippines was an interesting. First of all, it's on the other side. Obviously, it's on the other side of the ocean because if you're looking at Cuba, it's more on the Pacific side, actually in the Caribbean, and on the far western side across the ocean is the Philippines. Now, let me give you a little bit of history on the Spanish-American War. It started again in 1895, went through 1902, and it started with the Cuban Revolution. On February 24th of 1895, Cuban rebels launched a war of independence against Spain. American newspapers extensively covered Spanish actions in Cuba, increasing U.S. sympathy for the Cuban cause. There were rising tensions, as happened. 1896, Spanish General Weyler implements reconcentration camps in Cuba. Thousands of Cuban civilians die from disease and starvation. American yellow journalism intensifies during the anti-Spanish settlement. So the media is stirring the pot, as the media likes to do. I mean, the media hasn't changed much. They still like to be at the center, kind of justifying their own existence and stirring up stuff, making hostilities, making tensions markedly worse with their yellow journalism and printing anything anybody will say that they can loosely pin we have a source on. And again, that hasn't changed. We look at Russia collusion. We look at January 6th and the mess they started with that, completely perverting what actually happened. It wasn't an armed insurrection. If you heard that, you heard falsely. Please watch some of the documentary films that came out and much of the footage that has been hidden by Congress in the January 6th Commission. And ask yourself, why did they delete so many files and so much footage from what actually occurred on January 6th. Then why did, I think it was the BBC, why did some mainstream media sources pervert what the president said and take stuff out of context and splice his speech together to make it look like he was launching an attack on the Capitol when that never happened and it wasn't anywhere close to what actually happened? By the way, that's the benefit of going when your president says, come to Washington, I want to explain to you what's happening with election integrity. Those people that go, they were there, they know what happened. Everybody else is subject to a twisted view of whatever the media tells you. And that's why I like to watch things that happen live. That's why I like to be at events. That's why I like to go places. That's why I was a rescue worker at Ground Zero after 9/11. So when people say, oh, it was a hologram, it wasn't a hologram. I found pieces of the plane. They were real planes. So when people are like, oh, no, it was a hologram of a plane that crashed in and blah, 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 and they slow it down, and based on their little slowed down imaging, they try to prove that this could never happen and that couldn't happen. And it's faulty logic and faulty thinking. But if you show up and if you get involved and you find out what's happening in places, then you know. And by the way, if you can't go to an event, watch the whole event live. I recently posted about an event, and I made a comment about the event, and it was clear that multiple people who didn't watch the event started commenting on my comments. And it's like, we're not even watching the same thing. And so they thought I meant what the media told them, which wasn't what happened. And of course, the media is only reporting negative news and only reporting stuff that stirs up trouble. And so instead of saying, wow, this is a wonderful moment where God was glorified, they come back and they said, well, this is horrible and this is racist and this is, blasphemy and everything else. And it's because they didn't even watch the whole event. Get your information right, people. Show up at events. Watch what's happening. Don't trust the media to tell you. The sound bites that you get later are all you're going to understand about that historic event because somebody else wants to twist it. Well, guess what? They did the same thing in the Spanish-American War. And the media was doing yellow journalism and was twisting it to mislead people intentionally. There's a price to pay in human lives when that happens. So in February 9th of 1898, the De Palm letter is published, and the Spanish diplomat criticizes William McKinley. And of course, so they put it in the newspaper. And what should have been a piece of probably private foreign policy between a diplomat or an ambassador becomes mainstream media news in the United States. And so now Americans are ticked. They don't like their president is being heckled allegedly by the Spanish. They don't like what's going on. They don't like the reports that they're seeing in the newspaper, whether they're accurate or inaccurate. And then February 15th of 1898, the battleship USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor in Cuba. 266 American sailors die. The exact cause remains debated, but Americans immediately blame Spain. Newspapers popularized the slogan, "Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain." And again, in post-mortem studies of what happened on the USS Maine, it's likely that what actually happened was a boiler room explosion. I worked in the boiler room on the USS Abraham Lincoln during the Persian Gulf War. It's something I know a little bit about. So I think it's interesting. It's fascinating. But what's also interesting is the fact that because the media had so worked up the American people, they didn't really care what actually happened. They didn't care. And so they wanted to go to war with Spain, come what may. And so guess what happened? That's what happened. So here's some of the pictures from the Spanish-American War, which again, I think is really fascinating. I want to pull these up just to give you guys a little bit of a visual of what is happening back in the day. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. I think this was this was the USS Maine. This is obviously the USS Maine after it sunk. You can see the twisted metal on the mast and all of that. This is William McKinley himself. So fascinating time in history. Interesting things were happening. Let me continue, and we'll get to the end of the Spanish-American War. The United States demands, so March to April of 1898, the United States demands Spain grant independence to Cuba. Diplomatic negotiations fail. April 20th, Congress passes a resolution supporting Cuban independence. The resolution includes the Teller Amendment, promising the U.S. will not annex Cuba. April 21st, Spain breaks diplomatic ties. By the way, that's always a precursor to war, if you didn't know. 4 days later, the U.S. formally declares war on Spain. Congress makes the declaration retroactive to April 21st, just because that was when Spain broke diplomatic ties. And so the Battle of Manila occurs in the Philippines. Commodore George Dewey destroys the Spanish Pacific Fleet. American casualties are minimal. In June, the 10th through the 22nd, U.S. forces land in Cuba. American force troops arrive near Daiquiri, Cuba. July 1st of 1898, the Battle of El Caney and San Juan Heights begins. And by the way, if you remember the Battle of San Juan Heights, it's likely because of the Rough Riders and a future president who actually becomes president because of this whole thing, Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders gain traction. Now, again, McKinley is not president at this time. Wait a minute, he might be. So we have some pictures of the Rough Riders and what they look like. We have some pictures of San Juan Hill. Let me go back and just share with you just briefly for a second. So there's a lot that's happening. There's a lot that's going on. I really get into the history of this. Okay. So actually, McKinley became president in 1896, and then he was reelected in 1900. Well, in the meantime, what happens is his vice president dies. And so Teddy Roosevelt, who becomes famous for the Spanish-American War in particular, amongst other things, but in particular, that particular moment, he became famous in the American public. And I'm going to show you some pictures of that just to kind of give you a little bit of a visual. So Teddy Roosevelt gets a group of guys together, ruffians, and they go over there to fight in the Spanish-American War on the side of Cuba to help fight for Cuban independence against the Spanish. So this, of course, is Teddy Roosevelt in the middle. Here's an artist rendering of what happens in Cuba. Here's some actual photography of, I think this is the Battle of San Juan Hill. And so what happens is the Battle of Santiago de Cuba takes place. The Spanish Caribbean fleet is destroyed. So we destroy their Pacific fleet. Now we destroy their Caribbean fleet. Spain effectively loses control of Cuba. And then U.S. forces invade Puerto Rico. Resistance is very limited. And then an armistice or a ceasefire is signed. Major fighting ends. American forces occupy Manila. And then there's the treaty. So what's really interesting is there's a problem with what do we do with the Philippines? And so do we give it back to the Spanish? Well, we don't want to do that because we just won the war against the Spanish. Why would we give the Philippines back to the Spanish? Well, do we give it to Germany or some other major country that might be a little bit closer? And we're like, well, why would we do that? Because they're commercial adversaries, competitors, as you would. And so we don't want to give them a land and a country to govern. We don't believe that the Philippine people can govern themselves. And so it leaves President McKinley in this quandary. And he doesn't know what to do. And so he's finding out, okay, what do I do? And he actually, it's interesting because there's in researching this, so there's some accounts that we have found about McKinley and about what happens. And in 1900, he gives a speech called The Decision on the Philippines. And actually, it's a speech to a group of ministers. And President McKinley outlined his rationale for annexing the Philippines in a treaty of 1898. So this is what happened in 1898. And we're finding the whole story. So the whole story doesn't come to light until 1900, but it happened in 1898. Okay. He paid the Spanish under duress $20 million for the privilege. It was a difficult decision, and it foreshadowed the path of U.S. foreign policy into the next generation. So this is what became known as Manifest Destiny and the expansionism in the West. Multiple things led to everything from the acquisition of, I think, the Louisiana Purchase, Alaska, California, Texas. All this stuff kind of came in after the Spanish-American War. But I think it's interesting. In this speech, this is what he says. He says, when I realized that the Philippines had dropped into our laps. Now, again, this is McKinley. This is President McKinley in 1900 talking about a decision he made in 1898. And again, what's fascinating about this is he cites divine intervention from God. Basically, he begins talking about a dream that he had. And this is where the dream comes in. So listen up for spiritual intelligence. When I realized the Philippines had dropped into our laps, I confessed I did not know what to do with them. I sought counsel from all sides, Democrats as well as Republicans, but got little help. I thought at first we would only take Manila, then Luzon, then other islands perhaps also. I walked the floor of the White House night after night until midnight. And I am not ashamed to tell you, gentlemen, that I went down on my knees and I prayed to Almighty God for light and guidance more than one night. And one night late, it came to me this way. I don't know how it came, but it came. And he says, basically, it came in a dream. Number one, we could not give it back to Spain. That would be cowardly and dishonorable. Two, we could not turn them over to France or Germany. They were our commercial rivals in the Orient, and that would be bad business and discreditable. Three, we could not leave them to themselves. They were unfit for self-government, and they would soon have anarchy and misrule worse than Spain was. And four, there was nothing left for us to do but to take them and to take them all. And to educate the Filipinos, to uplift them and to civilize and Christianize them by God's grace, to do the very best we could by them as our fellow men in whom Christ also died for. When I went to bed and went to sleep, I slept soundly. The next morning, I sent for the chief engineer of the War Department, our map maker, and I told him to put the Philippines on the map of the United States. And then he points to a large map of the United States. And there they are, and there they will stay while I am president. So what's absolutely fascinating is McKinley is telling 2 years later a group of pastors about how he came to the decision on the Philippines. And it's absolutely fascinating. There's actually a name for it. They call it benevolent assimilation, which is the policy of the United States towards the Philippines as described in a proclamation by President McKinley and issued by the U.S. Secretary of War on December 21st, 1898. So the story goes that he had the dream in October of 1898, and then it became policy, and then it became actually part of the treaty. Now, it's important, by the way, that we understand this history because there's rumblings these days about what might be happening in Cuba and what U.S. involvement might be. So it's fascinating to dive into this and to look at a president who didn't know what to do with a country that we had just freed from evil Spanish rule, along with Cuba, along with Puerto Rico. We destroyed the Pacific Fleet. We destroyed their Caribbean fleet, and we defeated them on land. And now what do? We had been, again, it wasn't that long prior to that we were fighting for our own independence. In fact, it was a little over 100 years ago, prior to the end of the Spanish-American War, that we were fighting for our own independence. And so we were a ragtag group of colonists fighting for freedom. Now we were able to help another group of colonists in 3 different places obtain their freedom. But what do? We didn't see ourselves as England. We didn't see ourselves as an empire that needed colonies in other locations. But and so that's probably why McKinley had such a strong aversion to, I don't know if we should do this or not. We can't give them back to the Spanish. We can't give them to a commercial rival, and we can't let them govern themselves because somebody else will come in and fill the void. So let's make him part of the United States. And that's what he did. But he got that answer in a dream. Now we have looked and looked and looked and looked and looked and searched for anywhere that we could find the context of the dream that God gave McKinley about benevolent assimilation and the Philippines in October of 1898. And we can't find it anywhere. So, bonus extra credit for you if you can find McKinley's actual dream. I highly doubt if you can, but if you can, please let me know. When you look in places, it talks about this account. It talks about McKinley was talking to this group of pastors about the Treaty of Paris in 1898. The phrase Christianizing Filipinos has often been criticized. However, if the Filipinos were overwhelmingly Christian and mostly Roman Catholic after 3 centuries of Spanish rule. And so looking for the well-documented, or looking for the actual dream, we can't find it. It is documented that he said late one night, it came to me. Other episodes say it was McKinley's dream or a night vision that he had, but there's no primary source record of the actual events of October of 1898. So can't find the actual dream, but we can find, and by the way, there are no surviving dream journals, diary entries, letters, or memoirs in which William McKinley personally recorded the contents of his dreams. And so we know that. And so it's good to know that, but it doesn't help us much. Okay. So now we go back to another part of the story related to the assassination of William McKinley and his really good friend, Senator Hanna. So he actually had a dream. And there's a couple of things that I want to share with you on this. But let me go back to the timeline of what's happening. Actually, let me catch up on some of the comments, and then we'll go back to the timeline. I never knew much about Kinley. Yes. Breathe deep. Yep. Exactly. Same media. Yep. Same media today. Yep. I know that I believe that there are good people in the media, but one of my favorite quotes is somebody that consistently says, you can't hate the media enough. I'm actually of that opinion because I find very little redemption in almost anything that the media does, particularly the mainstream media. Are all parlays into Russia putting nukes in Cuba later? Yeah. It does. Vacuum after war. So true. Incredible. Divine intervention. Yep. God swoops in. his goodness, we got Alaska. You better believe it. And they named Mount McKinley, which is another part of the McKinley story. Accurate. He was on his knees in prayer. Yeah, it's probably why we don't know much about him. He gave glory to God. So we absorbed the Philippines in order to benefit them. Presidents don't just have diaries, they have papers. So they have copies of their letters, of their correspondence, of the official correspondence, of notes, and a lot of pretty much everything back in that day was handwritten. And so if you go to a presidential library, like there are just entire boxes full of different periods of time of their life and what they call the president's papers. And so it's hard to find an actual diary entry. But we begin to we found that there was a problem with the foreign policy related to the Philippines post Spanish-American War. Okay, so when was the Spanish-American War, right? So we got to look that up. And then who was involved? Okay, McKinley was involved, and what was happening, and blah, blah, blah. And then I found a reference to the dream he had in 1898. Okay, well, that's another source. Now I'm like, okay, 1898, before the end of the Spanish-American War, what happened? Why was benevolent assimilation become a thing? What were the choices? What was the whole? You have to understand in context what's happening around the foreign policy and why this president is pacing in the White House and on his knees and saying, God, I don't know what to do. This is literally the realm of nations. You know, Psalm 2, where it talks about God gives us nations as an inheritance and kings as his possession. We just conquered Spain. We defeated their entire Pacific fleet. We defeat their fleet in the Caribbean. We get Puerto Rico, Cuba, Guam, and the Philippines. But the Philippines is so far away. What do we do with it? Do we give it back to Spain? Why would we do that? They were tyrants. They were doing all kinds of bad stuff, according to the media, in Cuba. So we certainly don't want to give them back to, there's a love that we have for the Filipino people, which is one of the reasons why, just like for the Cuban people, why we jumped in to be part of them declaring their independence from the Spanish crown. Now, we don't want to give them to Germany or France. Why? Same thing. They're doing the same thing that we just defeated England for, and we just defeated the Spaniards for. But yeah. Absolutely fascinating. Yes, there is an account. See if you can get the actual account of the dream, because I see basically the account that I just read you that says he had a dream, and it's talk about when he's sharing it with the Methodist clergyman, but it doesn't say the actual dream. I can't find anywhere the actual dream. I would love to have the actual dream, but I don't know. Sometimes, you know, I recently ran across a story. And it's sort of dream related. So just a sidebar here. Do you remember Lincoln? Of course, there's a Lincoln that ties into this story. We're going to find out in a little bit. But you remember Abraham Lincoln, where he has the dream that he goes into the East Room of the White House and he sees a guy laying in state, laying in a casket, and everybody's mourning. And he looks at the Marine Guard and said, who died in the White House? And he said, the president, sir, he was killed by an assassin. I heard a conspiracy theory, and it's just a theory, that Abraham Lincoln wasn't dreaming of himself. He was dreaming of, years later, JFK. And so I thought, well, now that I found dreams on Garfield, dreams on McKinley, dreams on Abraham Lincoln, we're still looking for dreams on JFK, which is another one. I know that they've said that he was a vivid dreamer, that there might be some in his medical files. I've been looking through Department of the Navy records related to Kennedy. I haven't found any actual written down dreams yet. Love to get some dreams of Kennedy. So if you're a researcher and you really want to take a deep dive, go look and find if we can find dreams on JFK. Absolutely would love to, especially since he was on a boat that sunk during World War II, PT-109, and related to Lincoln's dream about the boat and then Garfield's dream about a sinking ship. So I think there's a nautical theme, and since JFK was in the Navy during World War II. I think it's absolutely fascinating how maybe he had dreams after being stuck out at sea for, what was it? I think 3 stinking days. So just incredible. But what I want to know too is, so far we have dreams related to 3 out of 4 presidents that have been assassinated. And so now I want to know, did God warn every president or speak to every president in dreams about his potential death and assassination? JFK's the outlier so far. He's the only one we haven't seen. What I also wanted to see is, I went back and I looked up through the White House Historical Association, the East Room. Because if somebody believes that, it doesn't say who it is. Lincoln, April 1st of 1865, has a dream that he's walking through the White House. He hears mourning. He goes into the East Room. There's somebody lying in state, Marine Guard, who died in the White House. The president, sir, he was killed by an assassin. Well, if it was him, why didn't the Marine recognize him? So is it possible he was dreaming of a future event? If so, which event? Brings up two questions. One, how many presidents have been assassinated? And 2, how many presidents have lied in state in the East Room? So here's what we found. Are you ready? This is fascinating. Although Harrison and Tyler are the only 2 presidents to actually die in the White House, William G. Harding had a cardiovascular event or a heart attack, and FDR had a cerebral hemorrhage. They also died while in office. There were also 4 presidents who died by assassination. They are Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy. In total, 7 presidents have laid in repose in the White House East Room: William Henry Harrison, Zachary Taylor, Abraham Lincoln, William McKinley, William G. Harding, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and John F. Kennedy. Of the 8 presidents who died in office, James Garfield's remains were not placed in the East Room, as he had died away from Washington, D.C., and instead his body was laid in state at the U.S. Capitol. So this is a mystery of history that nobody else cares about except you and me. It's like our secret. And the question is what was Abraham Lincoln dreaming about? Was he dreaming about his own death, which he was shot 2 weeks later? He was laid in repose in the East Room of the White House. But why would the Marine not identify, I'm talking to the president, if it was him? And if it was him at a future event? So now we know, up to that point, no president has been assassinated. So God is giving him intelligence about a future event. It's easy to think the future event was 2 weeks later. Could it have been 160 years later? Or 100 years later? 98 years later for JFK, 1865 to 1963. Well, now we know there's only 3 potentials, because there's 4 presidents that were killed, 3 of them that lied in state in the East Room. And by what the Marine says in the dream, it's the president, sir. So we know it's a president lying in repose. Of the 8 presidents that's died in office, 7 laid in state in the East Room, but only 3 out of the 4 that were assassinated, because the Marine Guard says the president, sir, he was killed by an assassin. So it could be Garfield. Couldn't be Garfield. Garfield didn't lie in state in the East Room. It could be Lincoln himself. It could be William McKinley. Or it could be JFK. That's why I want to dig into the dreams of JFK, because out of the 4 presidents that are assassinated, this is the only one we haven't yet found specific dreams related to his demise. Now, you may be asking, what are you talking about, John? You didn't share a dream related to the demise of McKinley. You talked about a dream that he had for creating the policy of benevolent assimilation of what to do with the Philippines at the end of the war and the signing of the Treaty of Paris. You're absolutely right. But wait, there's more. So now let's get into the story of the McKinley assassination. So buckle up for this one because it's fascinating. It's really, really cool. All right, so back to McKinley, the timeline of McKinley. So he's reelected president in 1900 with Theodore Roosevelt as his running mate. Mark Hanna opposed Roosevelt's selection as vice president. If you watch Theodore Roosevelt on Netflix, and you got to be careful because I'm watching one right now. I watched pieces of this one because it relates to McKinley, but I just watched Death by Lightning, which is the story of the assassination of James Garfield on Netflix. Highly recommend that. There's a little bit of language and might be some nudity in there, but I really like that one. I'm watching one on George Washington that is on Netflix. It seems like they're trying to point out every bad thing the guy ever did. It seems to be more about the fact that he owned slaves than about the fact that he was the founding father of America. So it seems to have a definite liberal bias to it and wants to paint him as a failure in his early years. I'm really looking forward to my friend John Irwin's film that's coming out called Young Washington, and I want to see what his take is on the early life of George Washington. But I love looking at this stuff. But there is a docu-series called Theodore Roosevelt. There's several that I've looked at, but this one, it's two parts. At the end of the first part, it gets into the assassination of William McKinley, and then Theodore Roosevelt is actually on vacation in upstate New York with his son on the top of a mountain when a guy climbs a mountain and hands him a telegram and says, McKinley's been shot. He's got to go back right away. So fascinating what we learn when we really dig into history. And we can't trust the media and we can't trust Hollywood. So we have to go back and I'll take what Hollywood says and then I'll go back and I'll look up the papers, or I'll read the diary, or I'll read an autobiography or a biography, or usually several biographies. There's a ton of biographies on Lincoln. But what we've done is we've looked up the papers and the diaries of people like Edwin Stanton, his Secretary of War, Gideon Welles, his Secretary of the Navy, Seward, his Secretary of State, that were in the room on April 14th, 1865, when he shares the account of his dream at the cabinet meeting. And so though I never meant to do it, I've actually become a historian because I'm now finding things in history in the original papers of people that aren't conjecture, that aren't fluff, that aren't conspiracy, that can't be reasoned away because people don't like the fact that McKinley relied on God. And we can learn things about these great men and the lives that they lived. So in 1900, we reelect McKinley with Teddy Roosevelt as his running mate. Mark Hanna opposed Roosevelt's selection as vice president. So in spring and summer of 1901, McKinley traveled extensively. He planned to attend the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. So this is like a World's Fair kind of an event. Has electricity. They're starting to make cars. So there's a lot of technology that's coming out. And so McKinley wants to be there. So on April 5th of 1901, he delivers a major speech promoting international trade and cooperations. Many historians consider it one of the most important speeches. By the way, if you may or may not have known this, love him or hate him, I don't really care what your opinion is about him, but President Donald Trump loves McKinley. Why? Because he was pro-tariff. He understood business, he understood the economy, and he was big time into the whole discussion of tariffs. And so if you ever see somebody get into an argument related to tariffs, if they get deep into that, they will discuss the tariff policies of William McKinley, because it's something that Trump, even in modern day, has looked to. So he delivers a major speech promoting international trade and cooperation September 5th of 1901. And again, many historians consider this one of his most important speeches. So September 6th, 1901, he appeared in the Temple of Music at the Pan American Exposition. He's greeting the public, and he gets shot twice by Leon Sagases. I don't even know how to say his name. His name is not important. I don't really care about the names of the assassins of great men. I care more about the great men than their assassins. So we'll just call him Leon. But it happens September 6th of 1901. September 6th to the 13th, initially he appeared to improve. Doctors believe he would recover. The nation received optimistic updates. September 13th, his condition deteriorates due to gangrene and infection from the wound. And that would be September 13th, 1901. Now, remember how I said Mark Hanna, the senator, was his best friend or one of his best friends? He was very much concerned. He had long feared an attack on McKinley. When informed that the president intended to continue appearing in crowds, Hanna reportedly expressed alarm. After the shooting, he rushed to Buffalo and remained closely involved in McKinley during his final days. Now, by the way, just a little side note about how he rushed to Buffalo. Senator Hanna had a house that I believe was right close to a railroad tracks, and there was a train that was coming through, but he wasn't close to a train station. And so what they did is I guess they sent a telegram. It's an incredible story. He went home, he got packed. They said, go out in your backyard and stand by the railroad tracks, basically. And what they did is the train stopped. They stopped the train, not at a station, near Hanna's house, so he could board the train and he could get on, and that was the quickest way he could get to Buffalo. So instead of getting a special train for a senator, which he's just a senator, but he's like the president's best friend, so they could have done it, but it would have taken coordination. It would, well, who is this guy? And if it was for the president. And so instead of all that, they just said, here's what we're going to do. Stop the train in front of McKinley's house, in front of Hanna's house. He's going to get on and he's going to continue on to see the president in Buffalo, New York, which is absolutely incredible and fascinating. So they say that when he rushed to his side in his final days, he saw the dying president, and witnesses describe him as being completely overcome with grief. Like he says, William, don't you know me? And so it's kind of heartbreaking, but also fascinating that he gets to his side. And again, he was somebody that was very concerned about the wherewithal of the safety of the president, particularly in places where he's open, where he's with crowds of people. Sorry. So while he's there, while he's at his bedside, he actually has a dream, or he had a dream several days prior to that. And so trying to find I had it at one point. In fact, I'm looking for it right now because I have literally 50 different files that are open related to McKinley and Hanna and all these things. So Hanna has a dream about McKinley. We didn't know this. This is fascinating as we're searching. And basically, there was a time when McKinley rallies, and that was between the 6th through the 13th of September in 1901. And initially, it appeared that he would improve. And so people are hopeful. The doctors believe he would recover. The nation is receiving optimistic updates. But what's happening is he's getting sepsis. He has gangrene inside the walls of his stomach. It's slowly poisoning his blood. He's drifting in and out of consciousness. And by the evening of September 13th of 1901, he knew he was dying. He knew he was dying. But what's fascinating is Hanna has this dream. And he has the dream where, now these are during the days that he's rallying. He has the dream where he comes at where the doctors come out and he sees the look on the doctor's face and he's like, what is it? And he says, it's the worst possible news. And he said, well, what's the worst possible news? And he said, I just took McKinley's temperature and his temperature is 440 degrees. 440 degrees. And so, of course, they knew the president was moments away from death. Now, I think what's fascinating about this dream is it's not literal, because you can't have a temperature of 440 degrees unless you're like with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and the fourth man in the fire, right? So you'll never have a temperature or a fever that high. But that's what the dream was. And it was during the days that he was rallying between the 6th and the 13th of September in 1901. And so everybody's hopeful. The doctors are hopeful. The newspapers are hopeful. McKinley's going to live. Everybody's thinking this is going to be fine. But inside his stomach, gangrene is growing in the walls of his stomach. Sepsis is coming in and taking over. His blood is being poisoned. Hanna has this dream during the days where he's rallying. And instead, in the dream, it shows basically that he's going to die. And so he believes, based on the dream, that it's possible that even though we're seeing good signs for McKinley, McKinley might actually die. And then there's this weird thing related to having a fever of 440 degrees, which is just mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. So the 13th of September of 1901, as I read, infection is taking over. McKinley knows he's dying at this point, and he says, it's useless, gentlemen. I think we ought to have prayer. Relatives and friends gather around the deathbed. The First Lady is sobbing over him, saying, I want to go too. I want to go too. Her husband says to his wife, we are all going. We are all going. God's will be done, not ours. And in his final strength, he put his arms around her. And there's a story that either he may or his wife, Ida, may have sung his favorite hymn, Nearer My God to Thee. Some accounts are him singing it quietly to her. Other accounts are her singing it to him. We don't know. But what we do know is that was his last words. We are all going. God's will be done, not ours. And at 2:15 a.m. on September 14th of 1901, McKinley dies. Teddy Roosevelt's on the top of a mountain in upstate New York, gets a telegram. He's on the top of a mountain. And they show this in the Teddy Roosevelt docuseries on Netflix. He's literally sitting at the top of a mountain with his son and complaining about how useless his life is. They put Teddy Roosevelt in as vice president. Hanna did in particular, because he was part of the New York political machine, and they were tired of the shenanigans of Theodore Roosevelt. Things like going to be the Rough Riders and part of the Spanish-American War. Everybody thought he was a nut job. At least a lot of the political operatives in New York did. And so they wanted to exile him into oblivion. So they said, I know, we'll promote him, let him run on the ticket with our friend McKinley, and ban him to political exile where he will do nothing as vice president. And that's what happened. He's vice president. He's only been vice president. He's vice president not very long, obviously. He's vice president not very long. He's McKinley wins the election of 1900 with Teddy Roosevelt on the ticket. I think it's March 4th. Back then was the day that they were inaugurated. He's inaugurated in March, and this is September. So he spent 6 months in oblivion. And like I said, he's on vacation with his son, and he's bemoaning the fact that everybody's forgotten about him and he's doing nothing. And all of a sudden he gets a telegram, McKinley's been shot. And he ends up, it's interesting because in the docuseries, he walks into a room and there's Hanna, the best friend of the president, talking about what a blumbering idiot Theodore Roosevelt is. And he walks in and he hears this whole thing. And then he says, well, the wounds are fresh. And Hanna basically says, nobody on this cabinet will do anything you say unless you stick to 100% to the policies of McKinley. And so he announces that he will. What history records is something a little bit different, but you got to watch Teddy Roosevelt because you're getting into Teddy Roosevelt's story. But he dies September 14th of 1901. He dies at 2:15 in the morning at age 58. His final words were, "It is God's way, his will be done, not ours." September 14th, the next day, Teddy Roosevelt arrives and is sworn in as president. October, which is 1 month later, Leon, the guy who shot William McKinley, is executed. You know, many historians view McKinley's assassination as the event that ushered in the modern American presidency because it unexpectedly elevated Roosevelt to power. Mark Hanna's famous words before the 1900 election, when they decided to put him as vice president, Mark Hanna even said, there's only one life between that man, meaning Teddy Roosevelt, and the presidency. And it proved to be prophetic about the death of McKinley, which 6 months into his second term has died, making Teddy Roosevelt president. There's a book, I think it's called Unlikely Presidents or Accidental Presidents, where it talks about presidents that have been promoted through unusual circumstances, and Teddy Roosevelt is one of them. And really any president that came to power through assassination. Truman's another, through the death of FDR. But it's just fascinating to see what happens when these things occur. So was he warned? He wasn't warned, but they were given a dream that he would die. His friend Hanna was given a dream that he would die. I don't think it was preventable. I do think he was given, or his friends at least were given, a little bit of a foreshadowing that something was going to happen. Again, I don't know. This was after he had been shot and while he was rallying before he died. But I do believe that God warned him through Mark Hanna's dream to get his affairs in order, because it looked like he was on an upswing. And Mark Hanna saw that obviously he took a turn for the worse and had a temperature of 440 degrees and then very likely would pass away. So this is now the third president that we have seen that has gotten a warning of some kind. Remember, Garfield didn't die in his dream. His vice president died in his dream. But in the manner in which he died was very much the manner in which his vice president, Chester Arthur, dies in his dream is very much the manner in which Garfield actually experienced death. And so it's fascinating. This becomes another one of the stories in the annals of American history that proves spiritual intelligence. It proves that God specifically wants to warn people, presidents of the United States, about their demise, about assassination attempt. We've gotten so many dreams about assassination attempts. Some will just say that we've gotten actionable intelligence that we believe have moved the needle. I'll just say that. And it would make sense because God has been warning presidents in dreams since basically the beginning of the Republic, all the way back to George Washington and the warnings of the three great woes in visions and an angelic visitation. So what do you think? Do you like this series? Do you like the dreams of presidents? Are you getting a lot from this? I had a dream about Trump. He was underground at a long conference table. Send us that dream. We have hundreds of dreams about President Trump. He's probably, I would guess, the person, largely because of our work, the person that is, as president, is the most dreamt about and has the most recorded dreams about him. Now, there's another interesting side note to this story, but because I don't like to glorify assassins, I'm going to leave this just as a little footnote on the side. Somebody else had a dream, or what they called a vision, if you were, of William McKinley. And it was a guy named John Schrank. And he claimed to have experienced visions of the ghost of the assassinated U.S. President William McKinley. And McKinley was telling Schrank that Roosevelt was his murderer, and Schrank needed to avenge his death. Well, I think what's interesting is there's an assassination attempt by Schrank on Teddy Roosevelt. In fact, it's the famous one where Teddy gets hit in the chest at close range. It's not successful, but he continues on while he's bleeding to give his speech, which gave him a reputation of being almost unkillable and being another story added to the Rough Riders and to the South Dakota legends and all that about how tough Teddy Roosevelt was. Now, this is not about Teddy Roosevelt, but it's interesting because there's another link, a vision somebody had about William McKinley saying Roosevelt was the guy that killed him. I very highly doubt that that's actually historically factual, that Roosevelt had anything to do with the death of William McKinley, but it's fascinating. And Teddy Roosevelt set up boxing matches on the South Lawn of the White House. So another wink to some of the things that are happening today. The East Room is not the Red Room, I don't believe. East Room, Rising Sun, yes. Harrison was my grandfather. Wow. Awesome. I love the presidential history stuff. I love, and yeah, we're gonna get into now. There's another aspect of this story that I think we're gonna just make into another entire episode. Do you know who witnessed the assassination of William McKinley? Robert Todd Lincoln. You remember, if you haven't watched Tuesday's Spiritual Intelligence Brief number 31 about James Garfield, you're going to want to go back and watch it, because I tell the story about how 2 days before he shot, Garfield has a dream, and he goes to his Secretary of War, Robert Todd Lincoln, Lincoln's only surviving son, and said, "Did your dad ever dream about death?" And so, yeah, he has this discussion, and he has it as a cabinet meeting. And I need to go see if I can get the actual transcripts of the cabinet meeting to see what was said. I think he pulled Lincoln aside. I don't think he talked about it publicly in the cabinet meeting, but I want to look up the memoirs of everyone who was in that cabinet meeting to see if anybody else records the discussion. But Lincoln was running late. He was getting there to, I think, say goodbye to McKinley, because McKinley was going, I think, taking his wife to the coast because she was sick. And oh no, I'm sorry, he was at the Pan American Festival. That was Garfield. So he's at the Pan American Festival. He arrives late to the Pan American Festival, and he walks in as McKinley is getting shot. So there's a whole story about how Robert Todd Lincoln was a witness to basically the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, James Garfield, and William McKinley. And the discussion he has related to spiritual intelligence with Garfield is mind-blowing. But I feel like we owe that story a little bit more of an explanation than a side note. So the guy that had the visions of McKinley, that'll remain a side note. But I probably will do a spiritual intelligence briefing on Robert Todd Lincoln and his connection to 3 assassinations. Why? Because he talks at length with Garfield about dreams. And because, as we found out, there are dreams connected to the assassinations of Lincoln, McKinley, and Garfield. So, yes, it's interesting that apparently JFK, as we're finding out here from Scott, had a borrowed time mentality, premonitions, basically that he was going to die early. McKinley had that. Lincoln had that. One assassination by slumping over in a chair as bullet hits were mimed. Day of death statements. Interesting. I'm going to have to go back and read these comments. Yeah, somebody said it's a lovely day for an assassination. JFK was not comfortable in Texas. Texas was Johnson territory. He didn't like it. 440 has to do with frequencies. Oh, related to the fever of 440. I haven't gotten into, I need to go back actually and get the context of the dream, the actual, and I've seen it somewhere, like it's not in a Wikipedia account, but like in a historic account, I've seen a little bit of the dream that Hanna had about McKinley. But I need to actually go back and look through the writings of Hanna, which I've started to do a little bit, to see if I can get his version of his dream. But the biggest thing is that during a time when everybody thought he was going to do well, the doctor comes out with the most horrible of news. He said, I took his temperature. His temperature is 440. And they either knew he was going to die or he died in the dream. And so it very much shocked his friend Hanna, who apparently had a weak constitution because he was sobbing and laying all over McKinley. And McKinley is brave, and he's brave in particular for his wife, who wants to go and die with him. And he basically says, we all go. It's God's will. It's God's will when. So yeah, something about the frequency of 440, that is an interesting number. That is really, really good. So we need to go back and look up. I'm going to see if I probably won't do a whole nother episode on McKinley, but if I can find that dream, maybe I'll post it or do just a short video that will attach to this one. Related to the dream, the actual dream that Hanna had. So I love the fact that you guys are lighting up the comments. This is what I like. The boxing matches, Orleans, McKinley, and Todd Lincoln. Yes. Would you like to see an episode on Robert Todd Lincoln and his connections to 3 assassinations and the relation, because all 3 of the assassinations had dreams around them, and its relation to spiritual intelligence? I'll have to go back and dig into the life of Robert Todd Lincoln, which I haven't done a lot of. We are going to make this a book, and we are going to make this a series, just so you know. That's why we call it the Dreams of Presidents series. We're going to make this a course. Eventually, what I'm going to do is make this a documentary film. By the way, if you know somebody that is wealthy and really likes this kind of content, let me know, because if I could put a small budget, say a couple $100,000 together, I want to get a research team and go spend like this summer in Washington, D.C., exploring the National Archives, the Library of Congress, the military, the Pentagon military history, looking up stuff like the records of JFK, getting FOIA'd information about this kind of thing, and working with the biographers of the presidents and doing a deep dive in particular into the dreams of presidents. And again, I want that to be documented and to do a documentary, and even to have some of the biographers, the famous biographers of these famous men, where we could interview them and they could tell the story as the one that is the expert on, the foremost biography of Lincoln or Kennedy or whatever. So, all right. That's one for yes. Let's do a Robert Todd Lincoln. Yes, the frequency 440 is, we need to look into that. Get cracking. We need to make that happen. I agree. We need to get I've actually thought about putting together like a crowdfunding campaign and putting together a budget for a documentary film on the dreams of presidents. I don't know if that'll be this year or not. One of the reasons I want to do that is because I want leaders, particularly politicians and of course presidents, to understand that God still speaks in dreams. it's one thing, as Lincoln said and Lincoln stated, well, he spoke to Pharaoh and he spoke to Nebuchadnezzar and he spoke to Abimelech and Solomon and the three wise men and the kings in the Bible. But it's another thing to be able to say, well, he spoke to a guy 60 years ago that was president of the United States. Or we have a dream from a president that's still alive that we've done a series on, and that's under the Barack Obama stuff. God told me to buy his book, Dreams of Our Fathers, because there was a dream in it. And sure enough, I did. And there's a dream in there. And we tear that dream apart, or we look into that dream and the implications of that dream. It was a warning dream to a still living president. And it's fascinating. I've actually reached out to a president or two in writing and through networks on interviewing them, particularly related to dreams. One guy I've had so many dreams about before Trump was president. I had so many dreams about this other president that I had dreams about talking to him about the dreams I had about him. And so I reached out and looked at being a part of actually a leadership group where you're mentored by three different presidents. The problem is the presidents that you're mentored by are Clinton, Obama, and Bush. But Bush was the one that I had so many dreams about that I wanted to actually sit down and interview him and see if he would talk about the dreams that he had when he was president. So I don't know. I've actually reached out to, like I said, more than one president. I have gotten an email back in a case or two, but it's fascinating. Mel, yes, Darren Wilson. We know Darren Wilson. He's done some Christian movies and films and documentaries, and he's known for some Christian documentary things. I actually am co-producer of two documentary films like Darren Wilson did. They're not the ones Darren Wilson did, but like Darren Wilson. And yeah, so we would be looking, should we put together a whole production team, and should they be there with us as we're uncovering the research and filming the documents and doing interviews with historians and all that stuff. It could be absolutely fascinating. And so do we want to get a group of film producers to follow us around Washington, D.C. for like 3 or 4 months while a team of us, maybe 10 of us, go out there and do an extensive deep dive like never has ever been done before on the history of dreams of presidents? And if so, we would need a budget to do that. But we could potentially crowdfund a campaign or something. Anyway, if you want to see that, if you're interested in a film project or even writing the book or even part of the research, doing part of the research, because with the internet, we don't necessarily have to be in DC. There's things that we can examine actually in the archives that may not be digitized that we have to look up, but we could just get an army of people together that could be doing the work of the research. I think it'd be fascinating. I think it'd be a fun way to spend a summer or a fall. I don't know if I'd want to be out in DC in the summer, but maybe in the fall. It would put us in proximity with some of the leaders that we're working and interpreting dreams for anyway. So that might be, it's something that I always thought we'll do sometime out, could be several years, but it may be sooner than we think. I've thought about that. I know John Irwin. John Irwin's a friend of mine, and he's the one releasing the young George Washington. So I've thought about doing that. Audiobooks. I listen to most of the books that I listen to on audiobooks, but then what I do a lot of times is I'll buy the ebook, because then I can do Control F and search the word dream. So that's how I do a lot of research. But I'm finding that you can get copies of entire collections of papers, like the naval medical records of JFK that are in the archives of the JFK Presidential Library, and they're in a box. But what they've done is they've digitized it. And so you're looking at 500 different pictures of one page, or you can look at it through a text editor that gives you everything in the box. And then I can search the box for the word dream. And so we're finding ways to be able to get access to hidden information. And again, I don't think anybody's ever really cared about the dreams of presidents. If you know anybody that has, if you know anybody that's as passionate about as I am, or that's a historian or that's looked into this stuff, please introduce me to them. Or if you know anybody that works at the Library of Congress or the National Archives, or is a presidential biographer or historian at any major university, that might be a really good start, is just to begin to have conversations with people. I believe this is going to be a big thing. Why? Because the more presidents get troubling dreams, and we are now praying that God gives people in power dreams, so they will specifically go to prophetic oriented people like you and me, dreamers and seers, and that God will speak to them and will give them dreams so that they can begin to understand the seer realm, and they can know more about spiritual intelligence and how it plays into what's happening in the modern day in the realm of nations and the lives of presidents and vice presidents. So, yeah. Well, thank you for being a part tonight. Thank you for listening. We went a little bit long, but this was good. A lot of information here. I'm glad some of you are very passionate. I've been passionate in the past about the visions of presidents, presidential dreamers. Yes, if you guys are passionate about that stuff, who knows? Maybe we'll get a group of us together. All we got to do is find somebody to write a check, and then we'll go live in DC for a couple of months and just do research. That would be an absolute blast. I would love, love, love to do that. But then make a film, and then do a series, and then do a book. And part of this could be a legacy that we may gift to the White House Historical Society or something like that. So future presidents, when they're discouraged, when they're down, when they're facing difficult situations like McKinley was in the middle of the night, when they're up till midnight, pacing back and forth. God, what do I do with the Philippine Islands? I don't know what to do. I can't give it back to Spain. I don't want to give it to Germany or France. Should we keep it all, even though it's on the other side of the ocean? What do we do? And then they get a dream. And so I want presidents to be encouraged by the track record of how God speaks in dreams through spiritual intelligence over and over and over again to chief executives of our nation. So let me know what interests you in this. Do you like the dreams of presidents? Do you like the dreams of the Nephilim? Do you like dreams and visions? Should we spend some more time on visions? Should we get into all different kinds of things? And I'm actually thinking of doing a World War II series. We know that Hitler had a dream. What about Eisenhower, Patton, or MacArthur? Getting into some of these. There's a story about Eisenhower who prayed just before D-Day, June 6th, right? And the relationships that they've had with God. But what about dreams in particular? So I would love to be a part of that. Let me know what you guys are interested in, because now I'm like a full-blown historian tracking down some of this stuff and finding out. Another one that I should do is I should look into the intelligence community's efforts of dream programs and programs in the area of spirituality relating to intelligence. That's a deep rabbit hole to go down. I've gone down that a little bit. That could be a whole nother series, but anyway, I digress. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for hanging with me tonight. Let me know in the comments what you want to see more of. I want to come back and I want to do some things that really are questions that you have, or things that need to be researched in the seer realm, in the realm of nations, in the realm of spiritual intelligence. And until I see you next time, keep dreaming.